Good morning, hello, and welcome to Pittsburgh City Council budget hearings. I'm Councilman Anthony Coghill, and I chair the Committee of Public Safety and Wellness. For this hearing, we will hear from the Department of Public Safety, Bureau of Administration, the Office of Community Health and Safety, and the Stop the Violence Fund, Trust Fund. I'd like to invite those from Public Safety to join us at the table, which they've already done, I believe. While you're joining us, I'll ask that our Budget Director, Peter McDevitt, give a brief overview of the department before we get started.
Thank you, Councilman. The mission of the Department of Public Safety is to provide for security and safety of all residents and patrons of the City of Pittsburgh through the oversight and execution of the public safety operational strategies through the planned and coordinated efforts of the Bureau of Police, Fire, Emergency Medical Services, and Animal Care and Control. This mission includes the creation of a command team with representatives from police, fire, and EMS acting in conjunction as the Office of Emergency Management. They strive to improve community and first responder safety through integrated response, training, technology, fleet upgrades, and increased community visibility, as well as enhancing and enforcing team collaboration across all public safety bureaus. They attempt to further their mission through the streamlining of administrative positions to provide cross-training support and improve oversight on resources, spending, and hiring practices. A quick overview: the Department of Public Safety Administration is divided into the following general service areas: administration, community outreach, nighttime economy, group violence intervention, Office of Emergency Management, Office of Film and Event Management, Public Information Media, Public Safety Technology, Special Inter-Bureau Operations, and Public Safety Facilities. A position summary: there's a total of 134 full-time positions for the 2025 budget, which is a decrease of 1 from last year. There was a number of swaps in positions that totaled a savings of about $89,000, and overall there's a decrease from last year in personnel by just under $20,000. A quick summary of non-personnel changes. Overall, there is about a $2.6 million decrease in non-personnel expenses. That includes a $43,000 decrease in professional and technical services, a $13,000 decrease in property services. Most notably, there is a $2.5 million decrease in property, which amount more than doubled in 2024 to catch up on police vehicle purchasing. And that is a reminder that all police vehicles are purchased from the public safety admin operating budget. They don't last long enough to be considered capital items, so we pay for them out of the operating budget. A quick overview of capital items. Public safety has a couple of capital items that flow through them, but mostly it comes through other departments. The Bureau of Fire has 2 deliverables for the purchase of supplies for a Bureau of Fire for supply hoses and the thermal imaging system. And then there's a number of capital projects that will flow through DPW facilities for public safety facilities. Those include structural repairs of fire bureaus, Fire Station 35 construction, Fire Station 20, Medic 12 construction, and the police firing range construction. And just a quick overview of the Stop the Violence Trust Fund. There's a total of 14 positions, full-time positions paid out of that trust fund. Those are for the violence prevention, and there's mid-year swaps for a violence prevention analyst. Just a reminder, 94% of non-personnel funding in the trust fund are used for the CSVP programming and include $160,000 for the Freedom Indeed, $2 million for Center That Cares, $100,000 for Operation Bedrock, $2 million for eviction prevention assistance, $50,000 for crime scene cleanup, $600,000 for the Pittsburgh Downtown Partnership Ambassadors, and $1 million for Poise micro grants. We're almost through. And then a number of other smaller trust funds that fall under Public Safety Admin. There's the Crossing Guard Special Events Trust Fund, the Emergency Management and Homeland Security Trust Fund, Public Safety Training Trust Fund, the YCPC Mayor's Youth Initiative, and the Public Safety Support Trust Fund. There are a number of fees in the fee schedule that flow through the Department of Public Safety, like 3 pages worth. So those are there for your review, and that's all I have.
Thank you, Director. Before we get to our guests and presentations. I think you have presentation. Is that right, Charles? Okay. I just wanted to acknowledge we are joined at the table by Councilwoman Bobby Wilson and our Finance Chair, Councilwoman Erica Strasburger. Thank you for being here. I believe Councilwoman...
Charlotte.
Oh, sorry, Bob Charlin. Sorry about that, Bobby. We are also joined online by Councilwoman Barbara Warwick, and that is it, right? Okay, that's it. And then please just, introduce yourself, and we'll get into our presentations.
Sure. My name is Lee Schmidt. I'm the Public Safety Director for the City of Pittsburgh, so I oversee the Department of Public Safety Administration.
Charles Showers, Manager of Personnel and Finance for the Department of Public Safety. Good morning, everyone.
David Jones, Assistant Director of Public Safety, Office of Community Affairs.
Thank you. And I guess, Charles, are you going to be
Yes.
putting the presentation up?
Yes, we do have a number of short PowerPoint slide decks to present, just to give an overview again of what some of the goals and accomplishments for the year, go into a little bit more detail on some of the budget requests when applicable, and just elaborate more on what we've been up to for 2024 and what we hope to do in 2025. So just a moment while I pull that up. Are we good? There we go. And I'm going to start with some of our highlights and accomplishments. Director?
Yeah, sure. Mr. McDevitt did a great job of giving the summary, so I'll skip through the first few slides, but just want to talk about some of the accomplishments from the department. Just so everyone's clear, within the department there are also other bureaus: fire, police, EMS, animal care and control, the Office of Community Health and Safety, Office of Community Services, Violence Prevention. Those are all handled a little separately from this particular hearing. So right now we're going to focus on Public Safety Administration. Part of that is our Office of Technology. We've expanded our ShotSpotter system into the Carrick section of the City of Pittsburgh to provide us an additional tool. We are also, for 2025, looking to expand and continue to support the camera system throughout the city. We do have a new contract in 2024 with a new vendor to maintain those cameras. That has been going very well. We average a 97 to 99% uptime on all of our cameras throughout the year, thanks to our technology manager, Dan Shack. And we will also continue to work with the controller's office around the ShotSpotter assessment and audit to ensure that those tax dollars that are used for the ShotSpotter system are effective and the tool is useful for us. Our park rangers continued to do great work in the parks. They responded to over 49 emergencies. They expanded the deer management program this year into Emerald View, Highland, and Shenley. As of last week, the 49 deer have been harvested, with 30 donated to local pantries. And we will continue to oversee that program as it progresses throughout the hunting season this year into next. Our Office of Film and Event Management, which handles all permitting for special events as well as film, did launch a new e-approval permit system this year. It's more friendly to the users as well as more efficient for us as the managers of the permit system that permits. The old system, all permit holders had to fill out every field and do the same thing. This system allows smaller events that don't need all the different fields to fill out to shrink down and makes it much easier. They're also allowed to do a simple reservation of space before they fill out their permit, just so we're aware. Someone wants to use Market Square or Liberty Avenue for an event, they can hold that. So then while they're still gathering the rest of their information, they can hold that space. So we know we don't have to reduce the ability of conflicts or the potential for conflicts there. They've also processed last year, or in this past year, over almost 1,000 events and film permits, as well as getting prepared and assisting Visit Pittsburgh and the Steelers for the upcoming 2026 draft. Our Office of Nighttime Economy expanded outreach into 150 different additional businesses, increased their social media following by 41%, engaged with over 1,500 business owners, hospitality workers, connected 950 entrepreneurs with grant opportunities, 8 of which specifically support BIPOC, Latinx, AIPI, LGBTQ+, and women-owned businesses. They also launched a survey to identify neighborhood-specific factors contributing to the epidemic of loneliness and isolation outlined in the U.S. Surgeon General's report. And with music ecosystem partners, collaborated to develop the lovepghmusic.com. They continue to do great work every day with our hospitality industry, and they are also supporting the 2026 NFL Draft, as they are on one of those committees as well. Next through is just the operating budget, which you all have. Unless you have any specific questions, I'll just kind of skim through those slides. And that ends the presentation for public safety. We do also have the great work of our crossing guards, which have continued to increase for the first time in a number of years, starting to increase staffing to almost 70 now. And then the Wait for the Walk campaign to try to discourage folks, make sure people are more aware of where they're crossing, and making sure they're following the signalized intersections lighting that exists. So at this time, I will, unless I missed anything, Charles? Okay. Open it up for questions.
Thank you, Director. And, just so you know, I always say about you have a lot more on your plate than just police, just fire. And this is pretty evident of it. A lot of things follow under, your command. So I just wanted to note that. And Councilman Charlene, I've only known you for like 8 years now, so I'm a slow learner. So I appreciate those presentations, and we'll just go right into questions, I guess. And if one of you are prepared or have any questions, please. Councilwoman Strasburger, thank you.
Thank you all for joining us today and for your presentation. I will jump in on the police fleet, and if you could tell us a little bit more about the practical implications of cutting back on new vehicle purchases.
So there's a few things with, cutting back vehicles obviously is a concern. We're also still behind on orders of vehicles that were purchased in 22 and 23. So we are significantly behind on our police fleet. As we cut back, I think there are additional implications we'll discuss more probably as more holistic during the police bureau discussion. But obviously anytime we have an aging fleet for all public safety bureaus, police cars are the cheapest, but we also go through them a lot quicker than the other vehicles because of the mileage, the amount of wear and tear. They're constantly on patrol, incurring those high mileage, so they last less than 5 years, which is also why they're not in the capital budget. And we continue to try to do what we can to make that fleet as efficient as possible, looking at the newest technology with the various manufacturers. Ford still seems to be the go-to for most departments across the country and most practical for us. We did look at Dodge Durangos, which you may have seen the state police started to switch to for a period of time. It was not effective for us, and now they've stopped making them. State police switched to Tahoes. That is not a good option for us with our small streets and small spaces, as well as how quickly we need to maneuver those small spaces. So Ford Explorers and the police Interceptor seem to be our option at this point.
And does that reduction in that line item also mean less maintenance? or is it just solely for the purchase of new vehicles?
That's solely for the purchase of new. That does not factor in
Okay.
maintenance.
Okay.
I will also say last year we did have a significant increase to that budget line item just to get an influx of vehicles post-pandemic, to help increase the number of police vehicles that get us caught up. But again, I think we have about 80 vehicles still in order process that are not on the street yet, that have been ordered and are in whether they're at the dealer, whether they're at the upfitter, that are not in service yet.
I believe we had an entire order canceled 2 years ago. So that was one reason why they had to put extra money in last year. Just 1 year's worth of orders didn't happen.
Got it. Okay. And what type of spending is generally included in machinery and equipment? I wouldn't normally focus on that line item, but I just noticed a pretty big drop down from 1.3 million in 2023 down to 10,500 in 2025. So what kind of spending is generally in that line item?
That's all police vehicles for the most part.
Oh, that is.
It was
Okay,
just,
that's where
they were just
sits.
listed under different
Got it.
lines a couple of years ago, and so it's just kind of been rebalanced.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Because it's also for the upfitting costs, so all the sirens and lights.
All the outfitting.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Crossing guards, one of my favorite topics. And I know we've never hit 100% of, the positions that are needed and that are available of staffing and crossing guards. We're seeing an uptick, an upward trend. That's great. Can you speak to any strategies that have worked in recruitment and retention?
I think there's a few things, and we are actually in starting negotiations of their contract. So I know there's some ideas, actually you and I have discussed, that we have discussed with the unions about what we can do to increase the folks that would be interested, whether that be neighborhood crossing guards. I think some of the things we have done to change and get more interest is active recruitment. If you know Donna, our crossing guard supervisor, she is very outgoing. She's very friendly. Anytime we have City in the Streets or other public events, she's out engaging with folks, handing things out. She did start even a program with the crossing guards that each crossing guard voluntarily gets some cards to hand out for various things going on in the city. One of those is recruitment of other crossing guards. So if someone's interested or starts talking to them, they can hand them the card and say, here's where you go to apply. We have gotten some younger folks interested in applying. So we still have a lot of folks also, retiring from that position, but we've been at least keeping a little bit of an increase going. But we continue to do, like I said, with the new contract coming up, we have already discussed with the union, and they seem supportive of some of the ideas we have to entice folks. We are also starting to use them a lot more for special events than we did before. So like Steeler games, Pirate games, etc. So there's more opportunities for them during their off season to allow it to still bring income in during those summer months.
Yeah, that was one thing I know we had discussed, is how to make it into a more of a 12-month year-round job, if that's something keeping people from applying for the position. So good. Well, if there's anything council members can do to help with that recruitment or retention, but recruitment, I hope you'll let us know. It's so incredibly important for our Vision Zero program. I know council member Warwick is online. We get so many requests for new intersections or intersections that just haven't been covered for a while, that we want to help anywhere we can. So I think I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Strasburger. And just want to welcome Councilman Kahari Mosley has joined us at the table. Thank you, Kahari. And if you're ready, Councilman Charlin, we'll go to you, please.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Councilman.
Yes, sir.
Coghill. Thank you all for being here. Obviously, huge department. I'm glad that we get to break into some of the bureaus because similar to we met with Domi on Friday, and it's like almost like we wish we could break them up into the bureaus as well because there's so much to talk about. So I will try to keep the administration stuff relatively simple, but I apologize that some of the questions I might ask might be related to one of the bureaus and not quite germane to this discussion. I want to apologize in advance for that. But in terms of the administration of public safety, what percentage of individuals are working from home right now?
In public safety administration, it's a fairly small amount. We have no one full-time from home. We have a few folks that work, a couple days a week at home and a couple days a week in the office. It varies by position. So it's based on how much they engage with the public, how much they are expected to be here and respond. And then we also have our, some teams that are to be expected to be in the field and in the community all day, which we are currently ramping up some of that activity that we've seen decline post-COVID. So we're working on ways to make sure they're out and about, visiting the stations, visiting the zones, visiting neighborhood community groups, etc.
It's good to hear. As I'm reiterating to all the departments, I really want us to be a leader in working from the office as we talk about the need for that. But I also understand that a lot of your department never spends all their time in the office. They're out in the field, right, so to speak. So another question I have, we're talking about the fleet, and I know this has been a conversation for a while, and I'm not sure where we are in the technology of this yet, but have we made any progress towards moving the fleet to electric vehicles?
We use some hybrid vehicles. That's all for public safety. That's all we have. Most of we have very few, other than emergency vehicles. We have very few vehicles.
Right. Sorry, I mean to ask about emergency vehicles.
Yeah. So emergency vehicles right now, we have not found any practicality to that. The fire trucks would not function properly. We have had discussions and reviewed some of that. They're just so large with our hills, with the amount of water, and then the practicality of charging and installing those stations is significant. Police cars are kind of the same. They don't really have a downtime to charge for 6 hours, as well as installing that infrastructure in each of the zones would take a significant effort. But it is something, folks that aren't aware, I do sit on the ELA board, so we are always looking at what options there are. I think as that technology progresses, we will get there, but we are not beyond the hybrid and the EcoBoost vehicles. For police and the smaller vehicles, we don't have anything at this time.
Yeah, but I'm hopeful that we do get to a point with EV technology that police cars can be EV, and that might require that we have to, I don't know, that we have to purchase more so that some can be charging while others are in the field. It's just that the way that an EV works makes a lot of sense for a police car, and just constantly running the car in the way that we do and the amount of fuel that we use, it does seem like that's a natural progression. The technology might not be there yet, but I would like us to be a leader in that and start to think about what a pilot for some cars that way might look like. We know that EV cars have the same horsepower and I'm not a car salesman, but I can drive just as fast and everything else that we need in a car, and it does seem like that could be the future, or will be the future.
Yeah. Like I said, we have looked at that, and I know ELA has had discussions. A lot of it is around the infrastructure, right? We would need to build that infrastructure at a zone in order to even start a pilot. So that's a significant cost with the electricity and the charging stations.
Sure. Related to that significant cost, the next question I had here, we do receive fairly regularly grants from, or approval of grants from the police department. Really, police and fire, I think we see the most from. How does public safety go after grants? Is it someone's job to be looking for grants? Is that one of Charles' additional responsibilities here?
It is. So Charles oversees the Department of Business Administrators, which each bureau has DBAs. So in conjunction with the operational staff of each bureau, the DBA is there to look at grants, work with the city's overall OMB grants team to determine which ones make sense, which ones we have, if it requires matching dollars, if there's stipulations, et cetera, to go for. Grants can be, there's many out there, but some are smaller dollar that sometimes we have found, a small $5,000 grant might seem like a great income, but the amount of work involved in getting that grant, the juice is not worth the squeeze, so to speak. But Charles' team, yes, and the DBAs and other finance folks are there to work with the operational staff as these grants come up. Some of the bureaus have very easy access to grants. Other ones, it's a little more challenging. And then that always changes based on political climate, et cetera. The Office of Community Health and Safety, which I know we're going to talk about later, also does a great job. They receive a lot of grant funding through that program just because of where they are. And then obviously the Office of Community Services and Violence Prevention receives some grant money, but also expends out grant money.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we collaborate pretty closely with the OMB grants team as well. Sometimes they have access to lists and announcements and things, and they'll forward those on to us, and we collaborate with them pretty closely to try to find the most effective and needed ways to allocate those and figure out what to apply for.
I have a very close relationship with my state partners, and they're often sending over grants as if I were going to apply for a police department. Now, granted, they're also sending that to like Brentwood and Baldwin and those kind of places, but it's one of those things. I'm like, I do hope that we are looking at that. A lot of the work that they do in the state is to provide grants so that we can apply for it. And I do hope we're not leaving money on the table. May I ask, are there ever times where we don't apply for a grant because we don't have the local match?
Not for public safety that I'm aware of. We even built some of that local match into the bureau budgets, like especially for fire and police, because they do get so many grants.
Okay.
I'm not aware of any circumstance when we didn't apply because of the local match.
Okay. That tends to be, I guess, more of a problem for DOMI, and it's something that I strongly want to see us make sure that we have a local match fund to make sure we're not leaving money on the table there. Great. Are PIOs more germane for this or for police?
No, the PIOs are under Public Safety Administration. There is one assigned basically for police. The other ones are the other PIO and media coordinator and digital media coordinators are in Public Safety Administration.
Are we fully staffed in terms of that? I know there was a period of time within the last 2 years where there was really only one. Are we?
Yeah, we are full staff by budget. So we have 2 full-time PIOs, a media coordinator, and a digital media coordinator.
And also, is the psychology contract or the psychiatrist that we're working with, is that more germane for this or police?
It's actually in HR.
HR.
Yeah, so the psychologist contract is in HR, not in public safety.
Okay. Well, I appreciate all the work that you do, and we've got a lot more of these that we'll be talking through, but that is my questions for today, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman Coghill. Gotta have fun while we're here, right? So, I'll just go in order, if that's all right with you, Councilman Mosley. Councilwoman Barbara Warwick is online with us. Councilwoman, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks. Sorry, I'm not at the table today. I don't have any questions. I'll just save my questions for the individual department hearings. I just wanted to say thank you so much, to Public Safety Bureau overall. You guys really do a great job, and it's just always so responsive in all things, right? And I really appreciate working with you and all the work that you do. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And I'll go to Councilman Kahari Mosley.
Thank you, Chairman. I just have a couple questions, and I apologize for coming in late. I had a constituent meeting that I couldn't put off this morning. I guess it's more of a 30,000, foot, question of how do you envision, in the scope of the 2025 budget, the ongoing, transformation of, how public safety is implemented, across the city with, the emergence of the Office of Community Health and Safety and the Roots program and things like that. How do you, from your perspective, how do you see, those elements of public safety growing, and what do you see their growing role in how public safety is done in the city versus how it was done maybe 10 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think for one thing, I have asked all the bureaus, and over the next year, this will be occurring, so by budget season next year we'll have it, for strategic plans for each bureau, each office, and then there will be a department-wide strategic plan. That is something, to my knowledge, has not existed in the past. I want to make sure we're looking not just in front of us, but 5 years, 10 years down the road to see where we are, to see how the technology that we're using now could evolve, what technology out there could continue to increase safety and our services that we provide, not only officer safety, paramedics, firefighters, etc., but safety for the community. How we can decrease negative interactions, etc. As far as the collaboration between the bureaus, that's also something we're continually working to increase, making sure folks are working together, training together, providing a overall leadership program for all of public safety. So folks are seeing each other. There's always been a saying in my career is it's much better to know someone in the calm times than it is during a crisis. And obviously in public safety, we respond to a lot of crisis moments, but we try to work on that collaboration behind the scenes. So I think and when Office of Community Health and Safety comes up and Office of Community Services and Violence Prevention, they're the preventative side of public safety, which is something I have always believed we need to focus on. If there was a way that we could get to a point where you didn't need police, fire, EMS, that would be great, but that's not realistic. But what can we do to make sure our residents, visitors, are given the tools and the knowledge they need to reduce the need for that? So are we making sure our roads are safe, making sure people that are in mental health crisis are receiving that, people that have a tendency of violence, that we're getting those folks before they commit that violence? What are we doing to reduce that need for the emergency response? Because when you call 911, the incident's already occurred. So now we're there to fix what the problem is versus preventing the problem to begin with. I always tout fire as being the most successful with this. When you look at fire 100 years ago, places were catching on fire, buildings didn't have sprinkler systems, alarm systems, smoke alarms, fire suppression, even just simple fire extinguishers that you have now. So a lot of this is through public education, public training to get them to learn CPR, get them to learn mental health first aid, having those responders out there engaging with folks. Even our police are very helpful with this, with our co-response program. They get to know folks, they get to know, downtown's a great example. They know many of the folks that are downtown every day. They can see them starting to escalate, when their mental health issues start to escalate, and they make sure they reach out to the social work team. The social work team then engages and gets involved to de-escalate, to get them the help they need and the treatment they need before they continue to rise and become a negative impact in our community.
Mm-hmm. And could you briefly talk about some of the things that have really worked, you know, in the recent past that was also reflected, you know, in the 2025 budget moving forward? I know I've heard a lot of positive things about the interventions that were done, you know, in the downtown area, you know, and I know that the Roots team is looking to come out into my district, you know, implement some of the things. You talk about what some of the best practices that folks across the city should know that also reflected in how this budget, you know, is going to be implemented, you know, with those best practices, addressing some of the things that maybe 12 months ago folks were really concerned about.
Yeah. We'll get in depth a little more when OCHS comes up,
Sure.
but we are going to expand those programs significantly. The co-response program will be expanded citywide with this budget. Not only citywide, but also evening and weekend hours. Obviously, people in crisis don't just work or don't just have a crisis Monday through Friday during the day. So we want to take that co-response model that's worked very well in downtown and in Zone 1, in Zone 5, and expand that through the other 3 zones, and have, as I said, evening and weekend hours. Roots will also be moving. We're already in the process of it with this current budget, but we'll be continuing that expansion of Roots, the reaching out on the street program into Zone 3, into the south side, to ensure our resources are there as well as the counties, similar to what we have in Zone 1, 2, and 5 currently. And the 5 team will cover Zone 5 and Zone 4. The Zone 3 team will cover Zone 3 and Zone 6. So essentially, Roots will be also citywide at that point.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I think that's all my questions for now.
Thank you, Councilman Mosley. I appreciate that. So I believe that's extended to questions from everybody who's either here or online, correct?
Do you have any?
I just have a couple. I'll be quick, though. Now we'll get OHCS up here. ShotSpotter, it's up, running, live in Carrick for some time now, a couple months at least.
September, I believe.
Yeah, and I guess my question is, do we have data from that? Do we have the available data as to like how many times it's been activated, and you know how many, whatever?
Yes. Yeah, we get that. We get the monthly report. I don't have one in front of me, but
Okay.
I can get you that information.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to if it was activated at all. I mean, there hasn't been any, I know, murders up there since then, which is good, but I wasn't sure if how many times it's alerted since its inception.
Yeah, I know there have been some activations. I'm just not sure.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'd love to know that number. I noticed facilities under here, and a little while ago, myself, you, Chief at the time, Councilwoman Strasburger, Warwick, and Mosley were there for facilities. Speaking of, we checked out, I think it was number 4 Bureau of Police and 5. Did we get a 5 as well? Yeah. All right. So I just want to, I know these 2 facilities house not only police but fire as well. So, and we've seen the condition it was in. And you were very thorough in showing us this firsthand, and we know it's going to be very costly to renovate at this point. So, has there been any progress on that as to the situation we were looking at there? I don't want to get into the details of the situation itself, but
Yeah, we are still reviewing that and reviewing all of our facilities. Police, obviously, from a facility standpoint, have the least amount compared to the rest of public safety, the 3 big bureaus anyhow. But we are looking at how we can modernize our fire facilities in a way that makes them more usable, make sure they're comfortable for everyone, male, female, whatever it may be, to make sure the bunk room, shower facilities are acceptable. They're individual, which is the more modern way to do it regardless. So it's not necessarily gendered, but just individual showers, individual bathrooms, restrooms, facilities. So we're looking at that for fire. And a lot of our current facilities is very difficult to renovate. You know, they were built in the 1900s, early 1900s. You know, some of them are well over 100 years old. So they were not designed for the current modern apparatus we have. The floors don't hold properly, et cetera. So we're always looking at that in conjunction with how we, you know, if it's currently a location that houses police and fire, how do we pull them? Do we pull them both out? Do we pull just one out? If we pull one out, does that give us the opportunity to renovate more? And what is the most cost effective, obviously, for the tax dollars that we get? A lot of it is obviously real estate is an issue. It's not like we have a lot of blank places to build on, especially with fire. We are very strategic about where every fire station is placed to ensure there's fire apparatus within 4 minutes of any property in the city. So, yeah, we are continuing to look at that plan, reviewing the Zone 5 location, the Zone 4 current location, and what that means, you know, where the patrols would go, how they patrol, and ensuring, regardless of where any public safety entity is, that they are providing the most effective and efficient response and patrol for our residents.
Yep. No, I agree. I thought it was, a very educational trip that we took there. I see the challenges with the current structures that we're working out of, both police and fire. I see the expense that's going to be involved in rehabbing these places. And for the record, I will tell you the potential site that we toured, I thought was perfect. But so I hope those advance. I hope those conversations advance. I hope we can sit down and, discuss more thoroughly as to, what the best thing to do is there. I know. And I think the most challenging thing is probably moving fire from those locations. Mm-hmm. Not that we have to, but if fire is going to stay there, we're still stuck with the bills and the renovations that go along with that. So,
right.
So I want to welcome Councilwoman Gross, who has joined us this morning. And I guess I'm going to go to you, Councilwoman. I really didn't have too much. Everybody else kind of asked questions I was thinking about. So.
Thank you, I appreciate it. I'm sorry, our feed was a little bit out in the offices, so I didn't catch everything. I caught a little bit on the Zoom while I was out of chambers, but I apologize if this was already asked, but I'm looking at kind of the Bureau's org chart, and there are costs associated with investigations that are housed in your office, Director, rather than in police or elsewhere. And especially for the 2025 operating budget page that's in your slides, you've got down at the bottom 3 large, I'll call them technology expenditures. And you've got a $1.2 million ShotSpotter, 1.3 million essential camera system, and then 1.3 ShotSpotter Zone 3. Were those always in the public safety budget, or were they in the police budget before this, I think?
Cameras and ShotSpotter have been in the public safety budget in the past, not in police.
Did we move ShotSpotter?
No.
So it's always, I can't remember, and I don't have all my previous year's budget.
No,
so
both of those
safety?
contracts have been in public safety administration.
Okay. And I know Councilwoman Warwick isn't here, and she often has questioned the merits of ShotSpotter. Some cities are questioning, right, the merits of ShotSpotter. In Pittsburgh, the conversation we've mostly had and the feedback we've had, including areas of my district, is that residents wanted to be covered by ShotSpotter, right? And so we've added more districts. Do you have any thoughts on kind of what the national debates are?
I think we do. We're looking, I did mention earlier, we are currently working with the Controller's Office to do an audit. Okay. Our overall ShotSpotter contract comes due the end of 2025. So between now and then, we want to have our own internal assessment. What we've seen across this country is different departments and different cities use it in different ways. We don't use it for investigative reasons. We use it for response purposes. And I think that's a big difference between what some other folks do. We don't, even between us and the DA's office, et cetera, we don't use ShotSpotter as a way to say, oh, the shot came from this house, so it must have been somebody in that house. That's definitely not how we would use it or want to use it, because there's no evidence of who actually committed the crime. But it does help us significantly with our response in canvassing. Instead of getting, and I know we mentioned it before, but instead of getting 20 911 calls because people hear gunfire and it's a 10-block radius and everybody's pointing in a different direction, ShotSpotter helps us to pinpoint that area to 25 yards. So then we can canvass quickly to see if there's any evidence of a shooting or a shot. And we have found victims, which, once we get the final report out, we'll show, when we've found victims without a corresponding 911 call, or when we don't find anything. There are many times there's still celebratory gunfire. I'm not sure why, but it happens. We had incidents recently around that, and or we've had, club staff shoot weapons in the air to disperse a crowd. So we definitely use it to help us police smarter and treat our patients better, to ensure EMS knows where that is. Police can get there quicker, because EMS and fire don't respond to a shooting until the police have ensured it's secure and safe. So prior to ShotSpotter, they would be waiting for a significant amount of time for police to look for any signs, to search an area, to canvass a space. Now they can focus in very quickly, clear that scene, then bring EMS or fire in.
Right. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. I'll wait until we get to the other departments or whatever they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Just to follow up on Councilwoman Gross's comments, I think the best thing about ShotSpotter, and every law enforcement official I've spoken to, whether it be former Pittsburgh police or somewhere else or from other municipalities, they swear by it. I've not had one law enforcement official say it's not a good technology. Of course, it's costly, but I think narrowing that shot, because I've had shootings around my house. Police have responded, and they get 6 or 7 different, depending on where you're at, where the sound's traveling. We had people saying it was up on this street, people on that street. So to imagine to canvass that area, right, to try to find out exactly where you could just narrow it down to that 0. And I'm glad we don't use it in an aggressive way, like you stated as well. So with that wraps that up. Nobody else has joined us online, right, Mr. McDevitt? So with that, I'd like to invite those from the. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate you being here, and I'm sure, Director, you're staying.
Yeah, myself and Charles will stay.
Okay. David, thank you.
David will probably return. Stop the violence.
Stick around. Oh, I thought we were just, stop the violence. Yeah, we covered. We just had the post agenda, so.
Okay.
And I included that in the overview.
Yeah, right. That's why we had him to the table, originally, in case he had any questions. David, you're free to go. Thanks.
All right.
So I'd like to invite those from the Office of Community Health and Safety to join us at the table. While they were joining us, I'll ask Budget Director Peter McDevitt give us a brief overview of the department.
Thank you, Councilman. The City of Pittsburgh created the Office of Community Health and Safety to connect our most vulnerable neighbors with the right services to make our city safer and more just. The office's mission is to serve marginalized communities that have been systematically isolated from society and victimized by an unjust system. Through the tireless work of frontline workers, public safety liaisons, and subject matter experts, they aim to address the needs of those living in poverty, experiencing homelessness or housing instability, substance use disorder, and mental or behavioral health challenges. A quick overview of the Office of Community Health and Safety. It focuses on developing a continuum of support, co-response, people in need of support, trauma survivors assistance program, law enforcement assisted diversion, post-overdose support team, reaching out on the streets, and community engagement and partnership. There is a total of 47 positions in the 2025 budgets. That is an increase of 10 from last year. Those include an additional 5 community social workers and an additional 5 community social workers too. Overall, that is an increase from last year by $729,000, or about 28%. So the summary of the non-personnel changes: OCHS's operating budget is minimal and covers things like workforce training, public health, professional services, and supplies. That is their budget in the operating budget. The Stop the Violence Trust Fund is authorized to be funded by a transfer equal to 9% of the police operating budget in 2024 per Chapter 237 of City Code, and up to $10 million. So there's a $10 million transfer budgeted in 2025. In addition to this transfer, an additional $1.2 million is slated to be transferred from the AHN contract for the Roots program into the Stop the Violence Trust Fund for the OCHS office to use. OCHS's portion of the Stop the Violence Trust Fund is budgeted very minimal, about 0.5%, and supplements the items budgeted in the operating budget. They have nothing in the capital budget, and that is all I have.
Thank you, Director. And we were joined, and I'll let her introduce herself in a moment, but I want to tell you, Director, I love your real charts and your stand that's behind Councilwoman Gross. So with that, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you so much. My name is Camila Alarcón Chelecki, and I'm an Assistant Director in Public Safety, and I oversee the Office of Community Health and Safety.
Thank you. And I didn't know, did you have a presentation or something you wanted to go
Yes.
through? Okay.
Perfect. And we also gave you some decks, slide decks to follow along. So we just wanted to show you how we've been growing in the past couple of years, really focusing on developing teams and programs. And so the first slide, you'll see our org chart and the different programs, but for the purposes of this budget, all the colors in orange are the ones that are requested for 2025, which would be a Zone 3 Roots team that would mirror the same as the other teams, with a team lead, a site manager, a site support, a community health worker, and a senior outreach specialist. And then if we move to the continuum of support, we've requested 5 additional social workers to cover co-response citywide, and we'll talk about a little bit about the study we did as to why we need that flex team at night and to cover the weekends. And those are the asks for this budget, but you can refer back. That is a pretty detailed org chart for the office. I wanted to just quickly read some of our 2024 accomplishments that we're very proud of. We launched the Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion Program in April of this year, piloting the program in police zones 1 and 2 after we did an extensive study with Dr. Johnson, flagging for the different crimes that the program bases its criteria on. And then in December of 2024, I'm excited to tell Councilperson Kahari that we will be moving into your zone, into Zone 5, which was the next zone that showed the highest need. We've been working with the commander already, so we've been taking some referrals, but we will officially have an assigned case manager in your area to divert people away from the criminal legal system and into services. So these are people committing low-level nonviolent crimes like prostitution, sex work, some possession, paraphernalia, and retail theft. So we are very excited. The National International Lead Support Bureau launched the program, and we are actually going to be receiving some funding from them. They were very impressed by the program so far, so they're going to be funding some developmental for our staff, but also funding different parts of gelada system that we use to house all our participants in. So they're going to be also funding that part because we follow the best practice. And we just received a grant from the Federal Bureau of Justice Assistance that will allow us to expand almost citywide. So we will be adding more case managers to the already zones, and then we will be also moving into the Zone 3 area as well. We also have distributed 2,772 doses of Narcan, equipping community members with the tools to effectively respond to overdoses and save lives, as well as 1,230 gun safety locks, which promote not only gun safety, but prevents also fatal accidental shootings within families and households. We've established partnerships between the Roots program and medical providers, such as our own Bureau of EMS and medical services from UPMC, Allegheny Health Network, and just recently University of Pitt. And we have exceeded our goal of medical coverage. So now our sites can do foot clinic, eyeglass clinic, wound care, and Hep C and HIV testing, which really is the biggest highs and demands of our in-house population. And we have also been able to do some Suboxone referrals and treatments. The corresponds program expanded to the Police Zone 5, covering half of the city of Pittsburgh since its inception, and it has had over 2,348 total service encounters. And I'll go more into what that means. We also launched the post-overdose support team, which aims to reduce the number of overdoses that occur in the city of Pittsburgh by providing supports to individuals who experience substance use. We recently onboarded last week the first peer that the city has ever had in its history. So this is a peer recovery specialist that will navigate and guide participants. That's one of the questions you had about best practice. We really want to make sure that we are hiring staff that help our participants navigate their care and their resources. In the past year, I have to say, we have a hiring committee within the office that did over 1,000, reviewed over 1,000 CVs. We've hired 23 full-time staff just within this year and have conducted over 200 interviews. Demonstrating our commitment to providing services to those in needs. And that's, I'm really proud of our hiring process team that have job descriptions beyond this, but have really stepped up to help us make sure we're hiring the right staff. So the co-response program, we talked a little bit about it last year, but this is a program that aims to partner social workers with dedicated officers to respond to behavioral and mental crisis in order to build trust and to provide services. Co-response seeks to reduce the propensity of individuals who are experiencing this mental and behavioral health crisis to engage in behaviors that might lead them into the criminal justice system. The program aims to both increase officer and community member safety, reducing force. Something that is interesting to note is that we go through a very exhaustive process of how we pick the police officers. So we do scenarios, we do interviews, but we also require them to go through the crisis response intervention training. And we are launching tomorrow the Co-Response Academy, which a lot of the co-responders who are interested in officers are going to be taking as well. So that is a very extensive, detailed training on all the different things that we've encountered this year in the field to make sure that we have the best trained police officers. So for our Zone 1 police officer, just a little bit about like their profile. He did the first diversion ever in the city without even having a diversion program. In Zone 2, our police officer has worked with the unhoused population for over 20 years. And in Zone 5, our police officer was a social worker before she became a police officer. And we currently have a new officer who's joining for Zone 1, who has experience. He actually heard about the program when he was in Erie and decided to apply because he was really excited about how police can now engage with their community in a proactive way. Okay, sorry. So how do you get into this program? If we go to the next, the referral eligibility is through 911. It's people experiencing crisis, and we obviously right now can only receive referrals from Zone 1, 2, and 5. But if you go to the next slide, you'll see how the program engages with individual. So 911 calls, and then the zone police request the assistance via radio, but a lot of the times our units also self-attach, so they can hear over the radio. The correspond unit then responds, and then there's this intervention spectrum that involves de-escalation, referral to service, and follow-up if needed. This is something that we have really focused on, the follow-up. We see other programs in the country that have been successful follow this particular, where we're doing home visits. We're not just touching people in the moment, but we're also doing interventions, case management to make sure that they don't recur in their crisis again. So I just wanted to show you the map. So this is from last year. This is from the periods that we're going to show you from April when the program launched till October of 2023 when we piloted the program. So as you can see, we were only in Zone 1 and Zone 2, mainly in the downtown area, but we also responded in the Strip District and some lower Lawrenceville areas, as well as definitely the Hill. And then in the north side, you can see the shaded areas. We also at that time were providing support to other zones, but it became apparent that we had to have a unit per zone. So Nick, if you can show this is the same map for what the program has accomplished this year. So you could have seen we went from 131 service encounters in downtown to almost 1,000. We have increased those numbers of care and support, and we, as you see, we're in Zone 5 currently, and we have only been there in 3 months. So you can see the number of encounters does justify the need, the high need that we needed to be in that area. We have worked in particularly with Commander Abrams with some high-level cases, and also in District 6 and 4. So we are, even though we don't have units, we get a lot of requests. So we wanted to show that we are using taxpayers' dollars responsibly and making sure, more importantly, that our people in most need receive the care that they need. So I just wanted to show you how much the program has grown only in the year that we've been operating. And if we go to data participation and encounters, the data that you're seeing shaded blue in the left is unique participants. So these are the participants that we're working with, who we're providing more case management, more supports to. So in Zone 1, we have over 140 participants, in Zone 2, 219, and in Zone 5, 145. As I mentioned, we've only been there 3 months. So there's a high need. And then the next graph that you see is encounters by police, so by our team. So that means more, this might be the same individual that we're touching more than once. So those numbers are significantly higher. There's 137 participants that were unaccounted for in this because they don't have an address. So a lot of the population that we're serving are unhoused individuals that we can't really geolocate. We are working with our software developers to see if we can just put areas where like some camps are or some people are engaging. So the next one, you see what we're doing, the referral categories that bring people into our programs, and obviously for co-response is mainly mental health related, But as you see, the second one is housing assistance. So we're working with a lot of unhoused population, trauma services, food insecurity, transportation. Transportation is an interesting one that we're seeing some of our folks getting stranded due to some issues we're having with the Greyhound station. And then I wanted to talk about some highlights from the co-response program, just to give you an idea of like what it looks like for them on the scene. And I've separated them via zone. So in zone 1, the co-response unit assisted on a SWAT call for a male who was barricaded himself with his children. And SWAT was in the scene, but obviously the grandmother were very upset because he was threatening his life and the children's life. And it was until co-response got that we were able to de-escalate the situation, get the kids out, and also provide those supports to the family so that the scene was also secure. We've worked a case that included a resident frequently calling 911, living in a hoarding conditions with pets. I think they had over 10 cats, and she was unable to provide for them. So we were able to get them food, but also we were able to get the resident into services, and the co-response unit actually cleaned her house. It's very shocking that Allegheny County doesn't have a hoarding. I hear they're going to start it up, but we do need a hoarding unit. We see a lot of need for that. They used to have one, and then they closed it. So we've been advocating for one. The co-response unit also arrived on the scene to residents where, unfortunately, a male had left a suicide note. The mailman had found it and called the police. Unfortunately, he had completed suicide in the second floor, and his family lived in the first floor. So we were able to provide immediate support, grief support to the family, which they later told us that was crucial in being able to move forward in the process. In the downtown area, we see a lot of the encampment decommissions that we were able to support the people who were experiencing displacement, and we utilize a trauma-informed care approach, working with Roots to offer all camp residents shelter, temporary housing, and ensuring de-escalation techniques. These tend to have a lot of situations where people get in crisis, so it's key to have our co-response unit there. We were also successfully, I think, Councilperson Wilson probably knows this person, and Councilperson Lavelle, there was a woman who was constantly going in between Zone 1 and Zone 2. She had severe mental health issues, and she was unclothed and just having a lot of unsafe behaviors. So the co-response team was able to do a lot of research and found out that she was from North Carolina and had all the supportive services. You don't really have supportive that amount unless you really need them, and we were able to really have her stabilize. She voluntarily went to Western Psych, and then we were able to secure transportation. She's back with her family now and is safe. And then for Zone 5, we assisted in the attempted homicide call for Sojourner House that was witnessed, unfortunately, by dozens of residents. And while active on the crime, the co-response unit not only provided immediate safe space to debrief, but we also called our program TSAP, the Trauma Support Assistance Program. So they immediately started providing trauma support to all the witnesses. So that's an example of how our programs collaborate together. We also were able to provide assistance in locating a missing minor. We're seeing trending specifically in the unhoused community, a lot of human trafficking, specifically underaged minors, and we were able to secure her with the work of Roots as well. And we work also with the Attorney General's office, and we were able to connect them with CYF, also a trafficking team, and now they're safe. And she just called us last week that she's enrolled in school and back with her family. We also assisted in Zone 5 a family domestic call, which involved a 21-year-old pregnant woman who was threatening her life and the life of her kids, and we were able to not only safely get the kids out, but we were able to get her. We had to 302 her, but she's now getting the supports that she needs. So those are just some examples of the co-response. We're constantly tracking data to ensure that we are following with best practices. We have a 0.36% use of force, which is beneath the benchmark of the national average. So as the director said, we are a preventative unit. We prevent violence. We're violence prevention, but also mental health crisis. And so with the 2025, this is what the team would look like. We would be able to be active in all the zones, but we would also be able to have that flex team to cover the night and the weekend. So we did data analysis in the next slide. The first two columns are weekday calls that happen after 5 p.m. when our co-response unit is off, and then weekend hours. And we compared them to the amount of calls that we were responding during daylight. So it's clear that there is a need to have that flex team to make sure that we cover those hours. So the ask are 5 master social workers and 5 master social workers that would work in the flex team. We saw the best practices to have 2 social workers per zone. They are in the field 3 days a week, and then the 4th day they're doing follow-ups. They work the same as police, 410s. The 3 days is important, so 2 social workers. So 1 social worker is working 2 days and the other one 2 days, but that 3rd day they interact. We actually piloted this in downtown, and we saw such an increase in care and getting people into the next services because those 2 social workers could work on their highest acuity clients in that day without having to debrief over the phone. So that's why we best practice. We asked for 2 per zone. And then moving on to the Roots program. The Reaching Out on the Streets program incorporates 2 key aspects. It's the sites that we have, the drop-in sites, but also a street outreach. So these are staff that are always on the street, that are always looking for people or going into the camps and providing supports. So what the criteria for being able to work in Roots, it's very low barrier. You're either on house, you're unstably housed, but we also work with people who just need connection to services. They might not be on house, but by connecting them to these crucial services, we can prevent them becoming unhoused. This next map is specifically from June of 2024 and October 2024. With the AHN transition, we lost a lot of data, and we finally were able to get them into our Gelada software data. And so as you can see, the drop-in sites are in zone 1, 2, and 5. And we're hoping to expand to zone 3. But even though we're not in these zones, we are still trying to support people as best that we can. Particularly in zone 5, we are actually going to be looking at a space in Frankstown. So we'll be moving from East Liberty into the Homewood area where we have the most need. The zone 1 is in East Ohio, and the downtown, the zone 2 one is in the downtown area. And we are also have started increasing coverage to the Hill District with outreach, and we also obviously cover the Strip and Lawrenceville. So the next slide, you can see the participants served in this June 24th till October 24th. We see the highest confluence in zone 2. We're trying to adapt our data collection because what our staff is saying is they sometimes see 100 people a day, and that is really hard to like put into data. So these numbers are probably higher, but we're trying to find an easy way for them to track this because they're in constant flow during the day of how many, the volume of participants that they have. Obviously, the number one referral category for us is housing assistance, but we also see a big need in food insecurity, transportation, substance use, and mental health services. Some of the highlights in Zone 1, our team was able to get 36 people into invite-only shelters since July. This is an incredible accomplishment. Invite-only shelters are very hard to get in. That's why they're invite-only, and we've been working with those providers because people tend to have very successful stays there and then get them into their transitional housing. We supported 7 individuals to obtain employment since September. We've had 0 safety concerns since the site has been open, since we transitioned into the city of Pittsburgh, and we're open 5 days a week. We actually have built really great relationships with the Northside organizations, individuals and businesses. They donate some of the businesses coffee and food, so they've become part of the environment of the community of Roots. And in the downtown and Zone 2 area, we became fully staffed for the first time in the program, and we have maintained operations while transitioning from AHN to the city. Connected 193 people to medical wound care, and 114 people we were able to connect to shelter. We played a major role in getting at least 65 people housing. This means either transitional or permanent housing. We're able to get more of those data. We're asking our software provider to be able to include what type of housing, not just housing as a whole. And in the Zone 5, we have been working with utility companies to get utilities restored to several clients, including disabled clients, as well as working with financial institutions to return money that was taken fraudulently from clients. So that is a big thing we're seeing in the Zone 5 area. And if we can get people their utilities back, we have seen that there's a least propensity for them to become unhoused or be on the street. We've assisted clients with job searches, applications, resumes, requests, and provided clothing and shoes for their interviews, as well as transportation. And we continue to collaborate with service entities in the East End area, connecting individuals to IDs, phones, housing referrals, clothing, food, and encouraging them to follow up with the next steps in our site. So those are some of the examples of what happens in the sites, but also with the outreach teams. So what we're proposing is a fourth team for Zone 3, as we've seen an increase in need, but having 4 teams would allow us also to have to be able to service areas that we're not able to service in Zone 6 and 4 currently. So that would mean a Roots team lead, a Roots outreach site manager, a senior outreach specialist, a community health worker, and an outreach site support for that. And I think that's, the next are just what is in our operational budget, from Big Bird, for example, to training and development and workforce. So that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Alicorn. I appreciate the effort. You obviously put a lot of effort into your presentation, and you're growing. And there's no shortage of work for you, it doesn't sound like either. So let me just check with members, make sure anybody doesn't have any time constraints before we start with our questions. And if everybody's good, then I will start to my right with Councilman Kahari Mosley. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate the thorough, presentation. My first question is kind of a micro question. So I understand you've identified a location on Frankstown Avenue.
The Zebra building, we're going to go see it tomorrow.
Okay.
For leasing. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. That's really good news. Just pulling my notes together. Yeah, if you could, just talk about from your perspective, what, a difference, and I know you talked to it at some length, but, the difference that, these budget requests, would make for you to continue the exemplary work that you're doing, over at Roots, just to kind of give your, passionate, perspective on, what, this budget, request could do for the program, and then what it would mean for the city.
Yeah. Starting with the co-response program, we would be able to be city-wide coverage, and what we've seen this year is such a high demand from the commanders in the areas that we are not in, but the need in the zones that we're in is so high as well that we can't service those individuals. So allowing us to have staff and teams in the entire city, we would be able to provide this amazing care to all the residents that need it in the different areas that we are not able to cover right now, especially in the off hours. This is, like I said, it was a study that we did, so we would be able to provide supports to people. I know currently there's not a lot of county programs that operate in these hours, but we do think that is important for us to be able to de-escalate and to provide support for people who are suffering on the weekends and in nighttime. A lot of the times we're seeing is we get people stabilized, and then in the nighttime when they feel they don't have supports, they escalate. And so we are able to pick it back up the next day. But I think having this program citywide would not only provide care to the people who are suffering mental and behavioral health crisis, but it also improve relationships between the police and the community, because people in the community start seeing police as part of the continuum of support, and the relationships improve, but also the relationships between government and our own city residents improve. We've seen, particularly in Zone 5, when we've been going into the areas, a lot of people tell us, wow, this is the first time the city has focused programming on this area, and we are really seeing a big need in that area, specifically why we expanded there. So I think it's like a 3-tier approach. It helps the immediate folks that need the help, but it improves also relationships between first responders and community, and it also brings people together and improves those barriers between government and the people we serve. It would also allow us to, our current staff are working really hard to provide the care, but having those 2 social workers per zone will allow us also to avoid burnout, to keep retention, and to improve conditions as a whole. With the Roots team, we're seeing, as we see this issue of homelessness, not increase, but have more of more visibility. It would allow us to cover, not rely on our county partners, but us take the lead in really providing these supports, particularly in the Zone 3, and then that would allow the other teams to then flex into 4 and 6 as needed.
Mm-hmm. Now, thank you for that. Can you, give some perspective, as well of, obviously this is, new territory, for city government. This is something that's only, is still in many ways in its infancy. How does, this office interplay, if at all, with obviously the traditional, source of this kind of service, which was, the Allegheny County Department of Human Services? What is that relationship like, and how do your office collaborate with them, them being the kind of the traditional arm of local government that provides these services?
Yeah, our partnership and collaboration with them is crucial, as they own all the services and the housing programs and really hire the providers. So we've been able to rebuild really great relationships. So we work with them in different ways. On the micro level, we have case conferencing between different staff. So the Resolve teams meet with the Roots team, the co-response team and the lead team to talk about participants that they're seeing escalated. We also are involved in the street medicine case conferencing, in the housing provider conference, to advocate for our city residents, but also to provide information on what we're seeing that is not really working. The Department of Human Services has been an incredible partner to us, and really listening to when we tell them that these barriers to care exist. And I'm happy to report that we are meeting with not only the director of the Department of Human Services, but her chief advisor. We've had now 3 high-level meetings. They're very interested in funding these programs. They are very impressed by what we've been able to accomplish in a year and a half, almost 2 years now. And so they're interested in funding programs, which would be a great relief on city resources.
Thank you for that. And another kind of micro question: how can our offices as members of council work best with you? I understand that you generally get your referrals from 911 calls, and I asked this because I literally got a text message this morning when I was on my way in about it was a business owner on Frankstown Avenue talking about an issue that he's facing. My office is following up on it with someone who seems to be in crisis with addiction in the business district. That's like at the far end of Frankstown, where the Jamaican restaurant is, and 3 Generations Barbershop, and the Cabaret Hall is. So when we get those kind of referrals, how do we best engage with your office, being that it's not coming from like a 911 call?
Yeah. So the co-response program obviously is deployed through 911, but we also have always encouraged you all to send us those referrals. You can send them directly to me, and I'll send them to the team. But a lot of the time, so we've recently got one from Zone 6. We get them all the time, but if you send them to us, we can look it up in our system, and we probably are already engaging with them. So what we can do to empower you all is you can have those conversations with the businesses, with the constituents, because a lot of the time they're frustrated because they're not hearing the information from police or even from the social workers, but we can provide you that information so that you, obviously without sharing protected information, but we can give you updates so you can refer that back, or we can go and talk to those business owners as well. We've done that in different areas of downtown, the Strip, the North Side, and I know that Sergeant Bristow is going in the different districts in Frankstown, having that conversation. Most of the time, those people will already be connected to us, and so we can just provide the information. So never hesitate to send us any referrals. That's one of the great collaborations that we have developed. Even if it's someone who's in house, we recently had someone from Councilperson Gross District that we were able to help them. They had just gotten evicted, but her office sent us their referral, and we were able to get them into shelter immediately. So they only had to be in the street for 1 day. So those are the things that we can collaborate. I would say also talking with your constituents, and I know it's very difficult because we do it as well, but we're going to be doing a lot more educational through our community leadership teams about our programs. What does that mean? And sometimes why things are not immediate. We are based voluntarily. People have to agree to the programs. But I think talking to your community members about what the work looks like and how we're working to progress to create this environment of community, truly.
Yeah. One of my final questions: could you talk a little bit about the philosophy of the program? Because I know in my communities, I'm sure communities throughout the city, sometimes, like you said, there is an impatience, and definitely understand the frustration of residents when there is folks who have mental health challenges or dealing with the crisis of being unhoused, or dealing with addiction, and we sometimes get outreach from the residents that we serve to say, go in there and just clean up that corner right now, and can you talk about why in the long term the strategies that you're using actually will bear more fruit than a more draconian approach?
Correct. Yes. So our program's philosophy is always person-centered, voluntarily we use harm reduction and trauma-informed care because we have found that if you coerce people into these programs, they fail. This is why for years it hasn't been successful, and we continue to see people experiencing crisis or being unhoused or being in extreme poverty. So a lot of the people that we work with are people who have been exited from every service provider, from every program. So we try to make it as low barrier as possible. The fact that we also don't require insurance allows us to help a lot of people without them needing to have that threshold. These programs tend to work more positively because people engage with us, people trust us, and then they start setting goals. And then that's when we see that path. And our programs, we don't exit people unless they decide not to work with us anymore. And that has been proven to be successful in other cities as well, but also in our own programs. We're seeing those success of people actually staying with our programs versus there's a lot of people you encounter on the street saying, I don't want anything from you. I'm out here surviving because I've been let down by so many different systems. I think one of the things that's important about our office is we also advocate for systems change. So we do see a lot of gaps in the mental health areas, systems, specifically when we 302 people who need to be 302'd, we're finding that hospitals are not retaining them, or the 302s are overturned. So we actually are meeting with the people who govern these entities. We developed a barrier form where everyone in my staff is tracking all these barriers, and then we present them to the providers. We've been having really great success even with the director of behavioral health, and so that's another part of why we do the in the field, but we also do the system-based changed approach.
Thank you. That's all my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman Mosley. And I'll open questions to Councilman Charlin.
There we go. So you mentioned the Co-Responder Academy. Can you tell me a little bit more about what is going on there, what that looks like, how long is it? Go into some detail on that.
Yes. So we developed the Co-Responder Academy actually from the asks of the officers and our social workers to receive even more training. So it's going to take 3 days. So it's tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday. And we have different presenters. We have, for example, we have Dr. Sheila Roth talking about wellness. We have our police team lead talking about resource and service navigation. We have Lieutenant Hantley talking about de-escalation and SWAT. We have Lieutenant Janocci talking about use of force. So it's different areas that we've been seeing in the field that we need more training, particularly our social workers, how to interact with officers, but at the same time, officers, how to deal with, we have a specific area about neurodivergence and disabilities, crisis response. So that's what we will be doing. And then most of the times in the afternoon is doing scenarios. So we have scenario role play where people are learning how different successful cases and seeing what the steps were from the beginning when we showed up till the end. So it's a pretty extensive academy. I can actually send you our whole syllabus and our presenters. I think it'd be very helpful if.
Is it like an opt-in? How?
Yes, so it's voluntary. So we are right now, well, it's not voluntary for our corresponder officers, but we've opened it up if anybody else wants to participate. But everyone in correspondence has to take it, as well as the crisis response intervention training.
So we are sending our co-responders there, and then police are opting into it? Is that?
Our corresponders, social workers, and officers have to attend it. Yes.
Okay, so the officers that are working with it. Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Yeah, that's the question I was asking. How often are you going to do this Co-Responder Academy?
So we are going to do it every time we onboard new corresponders as well. They're going to go through that training. We're going to do that training once a year because what we want to do more quarterly is the crisis response intervention training. And that one is all the corresponder social workers and officers have to take it, but we also opened it and had volunteer participation of other police officers in other zones. So we want to make that quarterly so that we can have that as well, additional to the Co-Response Academy.
Okay. One of the things you mentioned was the Roots Hub opening in Zone 3. What is the status of that? What are the plans for that? How can we help you prepare for that?
Yes, so that is dependent on the approval of the budget, but we have already started looking at different spaces, like doing some brainstorming, but we would like to work with your office to determine what is best, what area would receive the least amount of pushback. I think that would be very helpful. And we would also like to have some conversations with the community so they can understand what the Roots program is and the difference of what they've been seeing currently. So yeah, so it's in its infancy because we have to get the budget approved.
Okay, so so far we don't really have any plans set up.
No, we would use the same thing we used in the past too. We have all the JDs, we have all the processes, the interviews to hire, we have the training. We would just need approval to start that process.
Okay, is the Roots team in your office, are you prepared for, in terms of your bandwidth, do you have the capacity to manage the additional expansion?
Yes, we are very prepared for that. The way we design these programs is we have a team lead. Those team leads are really the lead within the area who take care of more of the operations. And then myself and the program manager, Ben, work on more high-level systems-based, but Ben is always also going to the areas and providing support since he has a huge background in outreach. But we're completely able and excited to have an additional team.
And I think that I am concerned about Ben, making sure that Ben has the bandwidth to make this successful.
I think Ben is going to be very successful. I think that right now, because we're going to other zones that we don't have a team, we're being spread thin. So having that extra team will allow us to really have a better support in that area.
So we've talked, and I think you mentioned it a little bit, the partnership with DHS and OCHS, that a lot of the work that you're doing is really DHS's job. We're taking on a lot of roles from DHS because they need supplemented. Have we talked at all about having, and I know that this is a conversation that we've had at points, but where are we right now in terms of DHS funding OCHS? Because again, they receive the funding to do this work that we are coming up with to fill their gaps.
Yeah. So we, like I mentioned, we've actually sent over our budgets. We sent over all our JDs. We've had 3 really high-level meetings with not only their advisors, but also people who work in the state level to get all their funding. So I would say we are very close to getting funding from them. This is the most momentum we've had in that space. They actually came back and asked for us to send beyond personnel budget. They also want to cover other needs budget, and so we have sent that over. So like I said, they told us they've been trying to do these programs. I think we have a very unique opportunity because we do really well emergency response, because we have that's the beauty of OCHS, partnering also with police, fire, and EMS. So I think that's something that they see as such a plus. And like I've said, they not only funding us through their different funding buckets, but also funding like the law enforcement assisted diversion and post team through the opioid settlement fund that they obviously receive more funding. So if I don't like to speculate, but I would think that next year we would, because their budget is different timing wise, that conversation is, we've never had that conversation like in this matter as we are. So I would be positive in saying that by next year we will start seeing those streams of funding come in.
Okay.
If I could just add to that, I actually on Saturday met with Director Dalton from DHS around this, and there is a joint grant that we just received. I don't know if Camila even knows this yet, but for $3 million that does cover additional funding for Roots and LEAD, as well as some police officer work around downtown and south side and north side, around encampments, etc. So I think working with DHS as we have been, what we're finding is having the best lane for each group. DHS and even the county in general, beyond their emergency services and their own police, they're not into or experienced with emergency response or immediate response. We are, right? As public safety, we do that every day. So what we've found is if we start to focus on that aspect and work with them to identify their shortcomings and our shortcomings on the longer term, it's a very cohesive relationship that seems to be working out very well. And again, like I said, we are looking at funding opportunities through Medicaid, Medicare, and just other funding sources that they do have that they could provide. We're essentially a service provider for these things, not just with the county, but as a provider, just like we do with EMS, that we can bill Medicare or Medicaid when we respond to folks and get them the help they need. So,
Well, that leads to another discussion as we're talking about the kind of all of the things that OCHS is working on. I know, and Councilman Coghill knows as well, that our major nonprofits are more than interested and excited about funding some of these programs. They, within their mission, these programs have to be within their mission for them to funding. Have we been having conversations with them at all on this? No.
I have gone to a couple of the funder convenings. A big thing they have talked about when I've talked to a lot of them is they want to see the collaboration that's happening, because they also, as you mentioned, like this, they feel some of this is on the county, some of this is on the city. They want to see us collaborating together, and then they'll fund us together, similar to this. The $3 million is actually through a foundation. So that's what we're kind of looking to do, is how do we work together to show that we are not, placing blame on each other or pointing fingers at each other, but we're both taking accountability for our aspects of this and working together collaboratively. That's a big thing all the funders have been talking about, not just with Health and Human Services, but anything they're doing. They want to make sure us locally are working with the county and the region to be thoughtful about how we do this, because as we all know, none of these social needs no boundaries, right? They come in and out of the city, they come in and out of the county. We need to make sure we're looking at that as a much larger picture. So that's kind of what I've heard from the foundations, is they're willing to fund a lot of this, but they want to see these programs as more the silos aren't there. So
Well, and I think you went a little bit on the foundations there. I'm talking, explicitly about the big five, UPMC and AHN, Pitt. It is very unlikely that we will receive a cash payment from them for the general fund. They have boards that they're accountable to. What is more likely is that they will pay for a LEAD program, or they will pay for the Roots program, those kind of things. Those are payments that they would be willing to make in lieu of taxes. And I'm curious if we've had those conversations at all, or we're just sitting, we're just carrying the cost of it for ourselves.
Yeah, I have not had those conversations. Okay. I don't know if anyone in OMB or the administration has, but
we've been just just to be, a lot of our programs are currently funded not by city dollars, but by grants. So we've gotten a lot of grants, the POST program, the LEAD program, the co-response program, except the social workers and police officers. We've had grants, big grants to support these, and these grants are gonna continue to be sustainable. I think for the office, as long as I'm an assistant director in the office, I would really stress that we need to keep the idea of person-centered, voluntary harm reduction approach that has been working, that sometimes some systems have different ideas about what care and enforcement and care and coercion and care might look like. So, but those entities, for example, the LEAD program in other cities been funded by private entities as well.
Sure.
Because so I think that's a great conversation to start having.
Yeah, I in my conversations with those organizations, your programs under your purview are the kind of programs that they would want to fund because they are programs that they can justify to their board.
Right.
They can't justify a street paving program in the same way that they can justify,
Yes.
anything else that
makes
you're
sense.
doing there.
That makes sense.
So, if the pilot is going to happen, I do think it's probably going to come through you.
Good.
How many employees do you currently have?
We currently have 48.
48.
Yes.
And how many are you expanding to?
So we would add 15 to that, and we have a couple positions we need to hire. We need to still hire for the POST program.
Sorry, so you have 48 hired right now.
Hired, yes.
How many are you budgeted for right now?
54, I think. 51.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're adding 15 budgeted positions. So that'd be 66.
Yes.
Okay. So you've gone from being a little office to becoming like a small department.
Like a bureau.
Yes. How many of your employees are working from home?
So I would say most of our staff doesn't work from home because they're in the field. So I would say out of the 48, out of the 51, most are in the field. And they do one day to do follow-ups, so it's still in the field, but they're like doing follow-ups with partners. And then the only people who have some days from home, not all, are some of the program managers, but that's it. Once we don't have enough space to have everyone in the office, so once we move into 611, a lot of the people who are in the field, we will be able to they will be able to have a space. They always been asking for a space so that they could do their notes. They're doing their notes in the car. They're doing their notes when they get home. So having that space is going to be crucial. But unfortunately, most of our staff is in the field, and none of the Roots employees work from home because they're in the site or they're doing outreach. So I would say the only people who work from home are like some of the data analysts, the program managers, and it's 2 days. It's not everybody's, mostly in the office. Yeah.
Well, Mr. Chair, that exhausts my questions here. Thank you for sitting in here.
Thank you, Councilman Charlin, and I believe Councilwoman Warwick is still online with us, and we will go to her. Councilwoman, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Thanks.
Sure.
Thanks for the thorough presentation. I don't have really, I mean, it's the work you all are doing is really impressive, and I've also appreciated working together on the cleanups of Eliza Furnace and Southside Trails. Those have been going well. I think it's an ongoing challenge. I did want to ask, and I know this is not really your under your purview necessarily, right? But I thought you might know, and just since you're at the table, just with regard, because we really have, or at least I should say, I have not really heard any updates on. So my understanding is that there are 600 shelter beds available, and what I'm just kind of I'd like to know sort of what the plan is with regard to getting people into those into that shelter, especially as it's getting quite cold. And I again, as like, it's not the city's, it doesn't fall under your purview, but I know that you're involved in the effort. So
Yes. So with the winter shelter, we collaborate, we work together to make sure we know of these vacancies, like you mentioned, to get our word out and to get people into that. So with 2AC opening, I know they're going to open overflow again. So we've been going to the different areas, the different camps, and letting people know that that is available. I think we're going to see a decrease in people in the trails once the weather changes. People are going to be more willing to take shelter. I know also there's going to be a winter shelter that's going to be opening soon, and that's one of the work that we've been collaborating with the county really closely to ensure that we can even get some holds there to have people that we're seeing outside. Additionally, I know in your area there are a couple people who are unhoused. We did some investigative work and found out that 2 of them actually have housing. And so their case manager had just not talked to them in 6 months, and they were about to be exited. So we were able to actually put them in contact, but we will also be letting people know through our different outreach staff that those shelters are available, and if people are interested. I know there's going to be a post agenda on winter shelters on Friday, but yeah, we are working with the county. There's a call between only homeless outreach between the city and the county. So there's, I think, 4 teams, and they've been doing work around how many people are outside, how many people, they've been doing almost surveying work, how many people are interested in shelters. And so we will be working with the county to make sure that we get everybody into shelter. We also have been advocating that these shelters have a longer stay, in the sense of that people don't have to leave in the morning, to ensure that people stay. We've also suggested bus passes. We've seen a lot of the time where people can't access their housing because of transportation. So that's been something that the county has been very helpful. So we're trying to make sure that the shuttle, the transportation, the bus, and the beds are available so that we can make all these offers to our unhoused city residents.
okay, and I mean, I guess I can ask more then at the post, because I'm also curious just about, because we do hear a lot about folks not feeling safe, you know, in a sort
Right.
of open room with a bunch of
Right.
cots, for example.
Yeah.
You know, if there are curtains that, or if people have places to keep their things where they can leave their things and come back. But maybe that's something for the
Yeah, that's
the
a great
following
point. We have brought up the fact that we need storage in the places so that people don't have to be carrying their things all around, and then that's why they decide it's better to set up a tent than having to take my things everywhere every day. So we have mentioned that as well. We have some storage, but it's more like a long-term storage. So we did talk to the county about having storage in those areas, and also the collaboration of our staff to be able to support. Obviously, involuntarily, it's not part of their job description, but help support these shelters. I know Ben worked the winter shelter last year, and really it was, we had really great feedback from the county of like making sure people are not exited for like eating snacks in their beds or for getting into a fight. So trying to train that staff also to de-escalate so that people feel safe and more people want to go into the shelters.
Yeah, and do we know if these shelters are just going to be available for the winter? I mean, you know, just for residents, you know, I think there is ultimately a desire, right, to not have folks living in tents, you know, out in the street. So to have that sort of more permanent solution. And it would be nice, even if our temporary shelters could accommodate that better, right? As we wait for more transitional housing to come online.
Yeah, that's one of the strategies that we're working with DHS, is to ensure that everybody that goes into winter shelter, that we can have priority, but also really focused, targeted work, so that once that winter shelter is closed, they can move into transitional housing. Additionally, we have also asked to smaller scale shelters that are more permanent. People tend to prefer smaller shelters than bigger shelters.
And what is OCHS's approach, and I guess public safety in general? Because I mean, you hear that a lot. Like, you hear people say, "Oh, people just don't, they want to be." I don't believe that myself. I think people want housing. I don't think they want to be living in tents. I mean, maybe there's a few cases of folks with some type of mental illness or whatnot that. But I think for the most part, people do want to be indoors. I mean, that's, so what is the protocol, for folks who don't want to, for whatever the reason may be, like, if there is a shelter bed available, but they don't want to take, they're hesitant to take it. What does your team do to try and ease their concerns or get them into a something that they feel safer, more comfortable?
Yeah, from the OCHS perspective, what we can do through the Roots team in order to ensure that the Roots team still has those relationships and make sure that they don't lose the trust of the participants, we are there to offer support. So what we do in a lot of the times is when we start having these conversations, either on outreach or in the sites, we really start more trying to engage with them. And once they tell us, like in this case that we found out, they have a lot of the time they have housing and they have case managers, we either advocate for those case managers to be changed, or we advocate for the provider to ensure that people are getting into their different housing. We do also talk about having different shelters if there are. I have to say, before all these shelters come live, for the past 3 weeks, we haven't been able to get anyone into shelter because they're all full. So that's kind of challenging for us. I would say on the more enforcement side, I would defer to the director of public safety, because if we become, through Roots, the person who's telling them you can no longer stay here, you have to go to shelter, I think a lot of the people will start losing trust in that team. But I know that public safety has some strategies around that.
Okay. Yeah. No. I mean, that definitely makes sense. I do. Yeah. So I mean, that's all for me. And again, we can talk about this more further. But I do. It's always a hard conversation. I speak for my fellow members, but I know for myself is the amount of work that the city. It's this difference between city and county, and just to sort of underscore for residents that the city of Pittsburgh does not operate shelter. Like, we don't operate housing or shelter. And so I just really want to commend, and given that sort of division of roles, of governmental roles, the fact that this team, this OCHS team, is doing such an outstanding job supporting our unhoused community and really making those intergovernmental connections, right? At the end of the day, that's kind of what it is, right? Is making sure that people are getting connected to the resources that are there, and filling that gap, right? And the gap is large. So at any rate, thank you very much. That's all for me.
Thank you. That's exactly right. And thank you for your collaboration in the cleanups. The manor looks great. I just walked by there, as well as the Eliza Furnace Trail and the South Side. So I thank you for your leadership in that.
Thank you, Councilwoman Warwick. So I was just informed, I forgot we have a hearing here, and it's supposed to already started. So I'm going to forgo my questions, because a lot of what I'm going to talk to you about is around the homeless and what we're doing in those avenues, and I count that Councilwoman Gross and I will catch up privately with you, but we do have time for Councilwoman Gross to follow up with any other questions that you have, and she'll be our last speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. And I'll just echo what some of my colleagues have said, which is that the struggle and we see so much good work that you're doing for city residents, right? You've talked about suicide intervention, suicide response. You talked about de-escalation for city residents. You talked about hoarding situations. Again, city residents. That as the city is part of the county, and the federal government gives the county $1 billion for social services, and does not give the city of Pittsburgh a dime for social services, and yet we're, because of the gaps in the system, I'll put it nicely that way, that we're spending a significant amount of city resources staffing out an entire department for basically social services, with either policing co-response, with the Roots team, with the homeless outreach, and I really appreciate that, because you have built out such a great team with the budget that we've allocated to you, that you're even doing policy work with the county, right? And helping to educate them where they have gaps in their system, and not only the county, but then also the hospital systems. Mm-hmm. So listening today, those are the things that really jumped out to me, and I really appreciate that work, because it's keeping our residents safer, and just since this is a budget hearing, budgetarily bringing down, I think, the kind of repeat calls that come into 911, which is kind of where this conversation started about doing co-response and these kinds of social services, because, a lot of our 911 calls that came again into, our budget burden by responding with both EMS, fire, or policing, were to people who were maybe just needing social services, right? But we're still taking our staffing time, our vehicle time, our overhead time, and really kind of a cost on our organizational chart. And so while we're spending our organizational, our general fund dollars on building out this section of the organizational chart, we're getting better response for our residents, and it's hopefully counterbalancing some of the costs that we were already paying, but with really not getting people what they needed.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to check on that. And I do have some offline questions that
Yep.
I'll either get from you or reserve for the post-agenda Friday, because I think we do see how much great work that your department is doing. And so many of us on council have spent several years now working on the issues around the unhoused. So it's going to be a good opportunity to compare notes and see where we are today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brief. Thank you, Peter. Invite-only shelters, I heard you mention that. What are invite-only shelters?
So those are shelters that they reserve who they let in, who they invite, and how they reserve the beds. And so by being part of this provider meeting of where not only the homeless outreach people are, but also these housing providers, but also the work to get people into those shelters. And those shelters people tend to succeed more in them. So we have to get people to a place where they're able to access them. So the North Side Roots Hub has really focused on providing all these services, either if it's like employment, mental health referrals, to get people into these invite-only shelters that are really, really hard for.
So invite-only must be privately run.
Some are, but
Right.
some are also still providers. Some are still, so they are like private, but they do receive funding from
Is it safe
DHS.
to say they're smaller?
There's some of it are smaller for sure. They're smaller and they have different services like case management, different services that they offer.
So invite-only shelters, are we talking 5 of them? Are we talking 100 of them? How many in the Allegheny County area? Do you have any idea?
I would have to check on that,
Yeah,
but
right,
we have started building relationships with a couple of them so that we can get our folks there in order to continue to make sure that they are sustainably there.
Right, so the people who, or the folks who put their invites out to whomever you are working in a pipeline with them. Is that
Yes.
is fair to
Yes.
say?
Yes, that's
Okay,
fair to
and-
say, yeah.
Yeah, you have a voice at the table, and we're now
Yes, now we
getting
have a voice. at the
people in
table.
these invite-only shelters
Yes.
through your work.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, I'll reserve the rest of my questions again, mostly surrounding our in-house population, and we can do that offline. So with that, if there's anything else from any other members? Okay, so if there are no further questions, can I please have a motion to recess?
Motion to recess.
Second.
Thank you.